Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is time. I am sharing with you guys my ranking video of all of the eyeshadow palettes I tried out in the year 2022. There are 33 palettes that I tried out this year. That is such a big number. And I have ranked them from least favorite to my very most favorite, and we are going to go through them all. I'm gonna try and breeze through these pretty quickly just so this video is not too long, but I will be swatching my top 10 palettes for you guys so you can get a closer look at them. But I can't wait to share them with you. We had better get into it, but before we do, a special welcome if you are a new visitor here. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this video and I hope you'll consider subscribing before you leave. Also make sure notifications are turned on so that you know every time I upload a new video. And with that said, let's just get right to it. All right, starting at the bottom, my number 33 palette, I've got to go with the Morphe Make and Bank palette. This is pretty easily the worst palette that I tried out. As much as I think the color story is pretty, it just, the formulas were not great. I didn't really like the matte formulas. They were a little bit patchy, a little bit muddy, and the shimmers I didn't think were that impressive either. Just overall, one of the worst palettes that I've ever tried. Ranked at number 32, I am going with the Cara Beauty Cool Whatever palette. I picked this up at a Marshall's. It was only like $9 and it's quite large, but as much as it looks like a ColourPop palette, the quality was not as good as a ColourPop palette, and I just was not very impressed with this one. Some of the shimmers you could kind of get to work okay on you, but for such a pretty color story, this just was not that good of quality. Ranked at number 31, I'm gonna go with the Essence Taupe It Up palette. You guys know how much I love these little palettes, but this one for me, I didn't totally love. It wasn't bad, but I felt like the grays were a little bit difficult, and I do find that grays, especially matte grays, can be a little tricky to work with, both formula-wise and also just the color gray can be a tricky one. I like a little bit of warmth in my grays oftentimes. I did really like these three shades right here, but these three I just kind of felt were so-so, and compared to the other palettes in this range, this was my least favorite. Ranked at number 30, I'm gonna go with the Nabla Cutie Midnight palette. Guys, I love these palettes. They are some of my favorite palettes and what I consider some of the most underrated palettes. I kind of feel like I'm the only one in the world that loves these so much. This one is very pretty, but it's very blue. So this is not one that I reach for often. If you are into blue eyeshadows, I think you are going to love this. I am so impressed with the Nabla quality. Really interesting finishes in here. This matte navy blue is really beautiful. I love this light blue that's kind of like a creamy powder formula. It reminds me a lot of Natasha Denona's formula. It's like a baby, soft baby blue that's just so fun. I love the bronze, but I have tons of bronzes in my collection, and I'm unlikely to reach for a blue palette to get a bronze. From here on out is where it gets pretty tricky because I do like all these palettes in some way. Ranked at number 29, I've got to go with the Sydney Grace Mountain Trail palette. I feel like a traitor mentioning Sydney Grace this low in the rankings, but as pretty as this palette looks, I just find myself needing something lighter in here. I've mentioned this before, but I always like something a little bit light in a palette. I just need something that's going to give me some brightness for my lid or my inner corner, and this does not have anything like that. And in addition to that, I have so many green palettes, you guys, and this is just not my favorite of the green palettes that I have. As much as I love the formula, Sydney Grace's formulas are always amazing, this color story I feel is just missing something for me. And ranked at 28, again, a Sydney Grace palette. This is the Tropicolor palette from Sydney Grace. Now you'll probably recognize why this one ranks a little lower for me. It is very bold and colorful. Definitely outside of my comfort zone, not a color story I'm likely to reach for very often. If you are into bolder colors though, I think you will love this palette. There are some really interesting finishes in here, some really interesting shades of bold color. And there are some shades in here that I particularly like. This cream shade, I've mentioned a couple of times. I mean, it looks kind of plain, like a buttery, like the color of like a stick of butter. It's like a light cream color, and it's not really a matte, but it's also not a shimmer. I don't even know that I'd call it a satin. It just has this subtle glow to it that is so beautiful on the inner corner or the inner lid. When I had this palette on my desk, by the way, this is one that they sent to me, I would sometimes dip into this palette just for that shade right there because this is so pretty on your inner corner or the inner part of your lid. I absolutely love it. And there are some other really beautiful shades in here. Love the bronzes, but there's a lot of color in here that I likely won't reach for very often. Ranked at number 27 is the Juvia's Place Nubian Earth palette. This palette, it's pretty, but the more I tried it, the more, number one, I realized this is my least favorite Juvia's Place palette that I've tried. There are just a couple shades in here that formula-wise I felt like were not what I'm used to from Juvia's Place. They just weren't the very best. A couple of the shimmers are a little bit weak, a little hard to build up, and then a couple of the mattes, particularly I think this one right here, I found to go on a little bit patchy. It was a little bit more cool tone than I typically like. It's not a bad palette, but you guys might know Juvia's Place makes some of my very favorite eyeshadow palettes in my collection. I have loved them for years, and I just felt like this one was not, for such a pretty neutral color story, it was not the quality that I'm used to from them. Coming in at number 26, I'm gonna go with my Pure Cosmetics On Point eyeshadow palette. This is the Wednesday edition. I feel like this should rank higher. This is actually a really pretty palette. If you like something simple, if you like a basic nude color story, the packaging is nice. Pure Cosmetics has a really good eyeshadow formula. The mattes, the shimmers are all really nice. Now, I will say the shimmers are not extremely metallic, but they're very, I guess I'd call them mature eyelid friendly, or a little more on the neutral side. If you don't want something that's gonna be obviously sparkly, they're very, very soft, I guess I should say, in the reflective quality. Let me just give it a swatch for you guys. I mean, it's reflective, but it's a little bit more smoothing, I would say. It actually kind of reminds me of the Persona Cosmetics shimmer formula, which I feel the same way about. I guess the biggest reason this ranks a little bit lower is it's not the most exciting color story. It's pretty basic, it's pretty nude, and it's not my favorite nude eyeshadow palette. That's probably just because my collection is so large. Ranked at number 25, I've got to go with my Urban Decay Wild Greens palette. Now I want to put a little asterisk by this one. This one is relatively new to me. I just got this at the end of November, so I haven't had a lot of time with it, even though I really do love this palette. I kind of recommended it pretty highly to you guys over the last month. I even gifted this to my sister for Christmas time. I think it's a really nice palette. I will just say this though, the full price on this palette is $44. I found mine at a Marshall's for $16.99, and I gifted it to my sister at half price. So I got it for $22. I love it for that price, but I don't know that I would love it as much if I paid the full $44 for this thing. It's good. I think the quality is great. I've used every single shade inside here, and I've been impressed with all of them. I think they're a really fun color story, but the pan sizes are kind of small, so I feel like this is, you don't get a ton in here for $44 in my opinion. That's the biggest reason it's ranking a little bit on the lower side. I do think the packaging is really fun. This would rank a lot higher in my opinion if the retail price was lower, around the $20 mark I found mine for, but I think at $44, that's a little steep for that small of a palette. Number 24, I'm going to go with the Sydney Grace Where the Wild Things Grow palette. This palette, I've only used about 3 times. I got this in the summer sale that they had back in July. And there's some things I really like about this one. Something about the way I have to end up combining the different shades. The looks come out a lot more colorful and kind of bold than I was anticipating that they would. They're not bad. The formulas are all great, as Sydney Grace eyeshadows always are. I have yet to find a formula from her that I didn't think was spectacular, but it is a little more on the colorful side. If you like something a little bit more colorful, I mean, like this orange is kind of bold. This purple's pretty bold. Even these 2 greens right here, like this one, which you think is more of like a silvery green, the type of greens I really love. It has quite a bit of like mintiness in it, and Sydney Grace metallics they're showstoppers. I mean, they are absolutely foiled metallic. So you put this on your lid along with like a pink in your crease, and it's pretty intense. I do think it's a good palette. There are some beautiful shades inside here. I mean, that green alone, like I need to reach into this more just for that green, but it's just not, combined with the purple or the pinks or the oranges, is a little too much for me. Ranked at 23, this one pains me a little bit. I really feel like a traitor for this, but I have to say it. I'm gonna go with the Harry Potter ColourPop palette. I wanna just say this. I am very attached to this palette because it is Harry Potter, but as I was ranking these palettes, this started out a lot higher, and then I kept asking myself, if it wasn't a Harry Potter palette though, how would you rank it? And every time I asked myself that question, it went down a couple in the rankings. Now, it's not a bad palette, but there are some shades in here, surprisingly, that I had a little bit, I don't know if I'd say trouble, but I was just not wildly impressed with. Like some of these more cool tone shades, I felt like I had a hard time building up. They just didn't have as much pigment as I'm used to from a ColourPop matte. Some of the shimmers I even felt were a little bit on the weak side. And there's quite a few shades that I just don't see myself reaching for very often. Even this green right here was a little too brassy for me. And these blues, I just know I'm never gonna reach into those blues. And other than that, I just don't know that the color story of this is super unique or even interesting to me, but I still love this palette because it is Harry Potter. I mean, the names of the shades alone just get me very excited, but I doubt that I'm gonna reach for this a lot unless it's like the fall and Halloween time. I'm in that kind of Harry Potter mood. This is purely a sentimental palette for me. It's not my favorite color story and formulas from ColourPop, and definitely not the best quality or color story that I tried out this year, which is so painful to say, but there are better shadows. If we're just talking about the shadows alone, There are a lot better ones that I tried out. Ranked at number 22, I'm gonna go with the Sydney Grace Be Mine palette. I feel like this one should rank way higher. It's a really good palette. It's a really good color story. There are a lot of deeper jewel tones in here. Like this whole section right here, I don't use very much. I mean, these ones, like these deeper shimmers, I don't often use a deeper shimmer. It's just a little too smoky for me. I love the packaging of this thing. I am such a fan for black and white prints. I love the XO. I think it's so cute. It is definitely good, but I don't think I've reached for this very much since the first month that I tried it, which I think was back in like February. Possible I could move up in the ranking, but for now, had to rank it a little bit lower. Coming in at 21, I'm gonna go with the Alter Ego Harmony palette. Now, the only reason this one is ranking a little bit lower is because I already own the Natasha Denona version of this palette. If I didn't, I would rank this one a lot higher. Quality-wise, color story, I feel like this definitely deserves to be in my top 10. I love the Natasha Denona Retro palette. It's one of my very favorite Natasha Denona palettes. And I have all of her mid-size palettes. That one is one of my very favorites. It's a beautiful berry tone palette. If you're looking for a dupe for that palette, which is very, very pricey, I highly recommend this one. I just don't think I'm gonna get a lot of use out of this because I have the original. That brings us to number 20. I'm going to go with my Sigma Cinderella palette. I feel like I should like this palette a lot more. I think the color story is super fun. The Sigma formula is kind of still growing on me. When I first tried this, I think I first got these palettes, and these, I have two Sigma palettes that we'll be ranking today. I tried both of them out around the end of August, I believe. I just think the shimmers are a little bit dry. I do really like them wet. I think they're very pretty. They're very sparkly and pretty, but I was not impressed with them as I thought I would be. And this is not a color story I've been reaching for much at all. I need to reach for this more, but I have so many other palettes that I just like a little bit better. Coming in at number 19, I'm gonna go with my Sydney Grace California Coast palette. This is actually a really pretty palette if you like soft pinks. Really, really nice. A lot of really beautiful lid shades. These shades are kind of like mid-tone roses. This one's a little bit lighter. That one's a little more taupey. Great transition shades. Some really pretty shades to smoke out the outer corner. I do have another palette from her though that kind of reminds me of this color story, but has a couple shades I like a little bit better that's gonna rank a little higher. Other than that, I think this is a great palette. It is really pretty. It is one I enjoy reaching for. I just don't use it as much as some of my others. Ranked at number 18, I'm gonna go with my Sigma Ambience palette. Now this palette is growing on me a little bit. Now this color story is gorgeous. It's really, really pretty. I mean, it's pretty, it seems a little repetitive, but I really love the looks that come out of this. The mattes are fantastic. I do think the Sigma mattes are really nice. They're really easy to blend, very pigmented, not muddy at all. They build up really nicely. The shimmers of this one especially are beautiful when applied wet, which is how I like to use this one. There's a possibility this one could move up in the rankings over time as I try it a little bit more. I think the packaging, I mean, let's just take a moment. This packaging is gorgeous, but for now, ranked a little bit on the low side. Number 17, I'm gonna go with the NARS Summer Unrated palette. Now this is another palette that when I first tried it out, I already had a bit of a maybe prejudice towards it because it was super pricey. I've always kind of steered clear of a lot of NARS makeup because I feel like it's just overpriced. I don't even know why I feel that way. Just for some reason I hold that against certain brands, yet I will buy all the Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes. I don't know why my mind works the way that it does. Anyways, I was kind of expecting magic out of this palette and I wasn't sure I found it the first time I tried it, but as I pulled it out a few more times, it has grown on me. I do think this is a really nice palette. It's very, very high quality. I mean, this is the type of palette you can build up a beautiful, very professional looking makeup look in a matter of seconds. It just blends seamlessly. The shades layer on top of each other really nicely, and the shimmer finishes are all a little bit different, which I really love. Beautiful packaging. It is a good palette. I do think it's a little overrated, a little overpriced, as with most NARS makeup, but I did feel that way about Natasha Denona at one point as well, and it is growing on me. Coming in at number 16, I'm gonna go with the Nabla Wildberry palette, another Nabla Cutie palette. This one, you guys, is so pretty. This shade right here, it's kind of like a silvery bronze. I've never seen a shade like this. It's so pretty, it's so glittery and sparkly, but the glitter is super microscopic. You guys see how pretty that is? It's like a bronzy peach with silver sparkles in it. It's so unique and beautiful. Very unique palette. Such a pretty one. I love pulling this one out in the spring and the summertime. I'm telling you guys, if you have not tried out these little cutie palettes, I think they are phenomenal. This one is so good. I feel like I should rank a little higher, but a lot of good palettes still to come. For number 15, I'm gonna go with my Natasha Denona Pastel palette. This is another one I kind of feel like should come in a little bit higher, but it is quite bold and colorful. Even though I don't feel like it's as bold and colorful as it first appears, I really enjoyed this palette when I first got it. I was hesitant to pick this one up because I kind of had a feeling this might not be my thing, but I have really enjoyed it. I have reached for it quite a bit, but since the fall, I've kind of stopped reaching for it, and I doubt that I'll pull it out until the spring because it's kind of more of a spring and summer palette. It's one of the few colorful palettes that I feel kind of playful with. I don't normally play with different colors. Like if I'm doing a bolder color, I'll usually go kind of monochromatic, but this one, because they're pastels, I feel like you can kind of get away with it if you're a little bit more, what's the word, boring with your makeup. I've really enjoyed this one. Not my favorite from her overall, but it's a fun one if you're looking for something colorful and fun that's not too over the top. Moving up to number 14, I'm gonna go with my Nabla Read My Mind palette. This is a really fun palette. Again, from here on out, I feel like all of these should maybe be ranked a little bit higher. I love this one. The packaging of this one is one of, I think it might be my favorite Nabla packaging that they've come out with yet. Love the Nabla eyeshadows. They remind me, I've said this before, but in case you're new, the formulas of Nabla remind me a little bit of Natasha Denona. There's some variety in the shimmer formulas. Some are a little bit more sparkly and kind of lid toppers. Some are more true metallics. All the matte formulas are nice and easy to blend. I think this is a really fun color story. I love the setup of it, how it comes in these little quads. The one criticism I have with this palette is I feel like there's a little bit of repetitiveness between these two quads right here. I kind of feel like maybe they could have added one or two shades to differentiate things a little bit, like these two are similar, or even these two are just barely different from each other, but I still love it. I think it's a really fun one and great formulas. Ranked at number 13, I'm gonna go with this Sydney Grace palette. This is the one I was talking about when I mentioned the California Coast palette. This is called the Summer Days palette. Now this one, it's like a pinky brown palette. Some of these shades lean a little bit more on the pink side, but you do have these kind of more bronzy shimmers that I love. They are so beautiful. They're just the brightness that I like. I kind of felt like the California Coast palette, I would have liked one or two of those shades to be just a hair brighter than they are on my eyes, and you get a lot in here that can do that. These two shades right here are beautiful. This one's a little bit more golden tone. This one's more of like a kind of champagne, like it has a little bit of shell pink in it and almost a little bit of taupe. And then you have this beautiful bronze here that's a little bit brighter than a true copper. It's so pretty. You guys, the Sydney Grace metallic formula. I know that I've said it before anytime I talk about Sydney Grace, but I feel like it deserves to be mentioned time and time again because it's so good. It's my favorite shimmer formula, I think, of all time. Her mattes are always amazing. They blend well. This is a great color story. If you like your neutrals that lean a little bit kind of pink and kind of bronze, you will love this palette. It's absolutely stunning. Coming in at number 12, I'm gonna go with this tiny little thing. This is the Pat McGrath Midnight Voyage palette. You guys, I think this palette is so cute. I kind of feel like I'm one of the only people that really love this little thing. I mean, it's super tiny. It was kind of pricey. I think this thing was like $27 for this tiny little, I've called it a Polly Pocket palette, and maybe that's why I like it so much. But I do think these formulas are great. I love Pat McGrath's formulas. If you are on a budget, I mean, $27 for this thing is a lot of money. But considering Pat McGrath full-size palettes are $125, it makes me feel a little bit better about the price tag of this, and it's a good opportunity to try out her formula without spending a fortune. I do love this color story. Now the shimmers in here, none of them are her extra special shimmer formula that she's kind of known for, the one that's very glittery and sparkly. They're more just her traditional shimmers, but I think those are great as well. I love this deep berry right here. I mean, would you even call this a berry? It's like a black cherry color. Oh, it's gorgeous on the eyes. I love this little palette. I think it's super fun, super travel friendly. I kind of wish she'd come out with more of these. I don't know that everyone loved these as much as I did, so I don't know that she's likely to do this very often, but if she does, I will be first in line to buy one of these Polly Pocket palettes. Number 11, I'm gonna go with the Huda Beauty Empowered palette. This is a really fun palette with a lot of texture inside that I really love. There are a couple criticisms I have with this one. I didn't love the cream gel formula as much as I like the cream formula in the Patrick Ta palette. I just didn't think it was quite as rich and pigmented. It wasn't bad. This shade right here, which is a true like creamy bronze, it's a beautiful shade, but it creases on me very intensely, whether I'm wearing a primer or not. It's unfortunate because, man, you guys, it's so pretty and the texture on the eyelids is beautiful, but within 45 minutes, this thing will crease pretty badly on me. Oh, look how pretty that is. That is so sad. I also found myself wishing that one of these yellows was like a light champagne. That would have added so much variety to this palette for me, again, because I like to put something light on my inner lid. The mattes in here are amazing. I love this shade right here, which is kind of like a taupey metallic. It's absolutely stunning. Oh, one of the prettiest shades ever. Really great palette. I've had a lot of fun with this one. I just found there were just a few things I would have liked to see that would have made it just perfection for me. And that brings us to my top 10. So I will insert for you guys some swatches of each of these palettes as we're going through them. And coming in at number 10, I am going to go with the Heather Austin and Adept Cosmetics palette. Heather is a good friend of mine here on YouTube. She knows her eyeshadows and she did an incredible job with this palette. Now, I'm not just mentioning this palette because Heather's my friend. This is a very unique eyeshadow palette. The shades in here, there are so many shades in here that are just so unique and incredible. I had to give her some credit for them. It's a really fun one to play with. The only thing I will say is if you are only into pretty basic neutral looks, maybe you're going for more of like a, is she even wearing makeup at all? Like a natural beauty kind of makeup look with your eyeshadow. This is probably not the palette for that because these are showstoppers. I mean, these shimmers are so multi-dimensional and reflective. They're absolutely going to get attention, which I love. But if that's not your thing, just be aware of that. I mean, look at these, you guys. They are incredible. I've never tried anything quite like this. I've tried some duochromes. I mean, Natasha Denona has a lot that I love, but these are duochromes on steroids, as I call them. They are just so unique, so pretty. The mattes in here are beautiful as well. Great quality. I love this palette. It is so much fun. Now it is bold, so I have to be in a bold mood to play with this one, but every time I've played with it, I've loved the looks that come out of it. Quality is amazing. My hat is off to you, Heather. You did an incredible job with this palette. I am so impressed with it. Ranked at number 9 is an older palette, but it is a new try for me this year. It is the Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels palette. So it took me a long time to try out this palette. Finally, Sydney Grace sent this to me this last year, which I was so grateful for. Man, you guys, I don't know why I waited so long. This palette is so fun. It's like 75% neutral, 25% color, which is just the kind of ratio that I like. It gives you enough color that you can be fun and creative, but none of the colors are overly bold. They're a little bit softer, a little bit more almost pastel in tone, but there's tons of neutrals in here to play with as well. You have the amazing Sydney Grace metallic formula that I just can't get enough of in the prettiest shades. Just look at these, you guys. I mean, look at that. Oh, how could you not just want to put those all over your body? I just think they are so fun, so beautiful. I love Sydney Grace eyeshadows. This palette, I mean, the pans are massive. This thing is going to last me for generations. Such a great color story. Mel Thompson, I mean, that woman knows her eyeshadows and she did a fantastic job with this. The formulas are great. The color story is great. Very, very fun palette that I still highly recommend if you haven't picked it up yet. Ranked at number 8, I'm gonna go with the Essence My Rose Will Go On palette. This tiny little $4 palette is such a powerhouse. I love this one. It kind of reminds me of a more compact version of like the Blush Crush palette from ColourPop that I love. I cannot believe this thing is $4. I mean, the quality of these shadows are amazing. The color setup is really good. I love the ratio of mattes to shimmers, the ratio from light to dark. If you're into a soft pink feminine looking eye look, this is going to give you the most perfect soft pink feminine eye. I absolutely love it. Just look at this metallic right here, you guys. I mean, even if this thing wasn't $3.99, like this was a $10 palette, I still think I would like it just as much. It is worth that much. I mean, it's so good. The packaging is great. They're super compact and travel friendly. Love this color story. If you're into your pinks, you're going to love this palette. Very, very impressed with the majority of these palettes. I love almost all of them, but this is one of my favorites. But even more than that one, ranked at number 7, I'm gonna go with the Nothing Compares to Nude palette. I feel like everyone has raved about this palette this last year or two, and it is so good. If you like your very basic neutrals, if you are a basic eyeshadow girl, you probably already own this one. I'm sure you are familiar with this thing. It is so good. The formulas are great. I love the different shimmers that you get inside here. You get a really nice transition shade if you have more medium to fair skin. The shimmers are just amazing. I was wearing this one on my eyes just a couple days ago and I love it. It is so good. Worth a lot more than $3.99, but at $3.99, I'm just all the more impressed. Coming in at number 6, I am going to go with the Anastasia Beverly Hills Rose Metals palette. This palette is very good. Now, I have said this several times. Every time I talk about this palette, I feel like I need to talk about how we got to know each other. But I was a little worried when I first opened this and swatched it that it was going to be too deep and too smoky for me. The eye looks that come out of this are a little bit on the smoky side, but that said, they are stunning. They're absolutely beautiful. There are some really incredible standout shades inside here. This taupey metallic right here is kind of a silvery taupe, you guys. Every time I swatch this thing, I think to myself, that's gonna be way too dark, but then you put it on your eyes and it's just so reflective that it looks a lot lighter on your eyes than it does in the pan or even in the swatch. It's gorgeous. Every look I've done with this palette, while I don't feel like the variety is huge, I feel like a lot of the looks kind of come out somewhat similar because they're all just a little bit rich and smoky. But that said, they are gorgeous. Very beautiful palette, incredible quality. These ABH palettes kind of reignited my love for her, and I like that the pan sizes are a little bit bigger. I think I like the bigger pan sizes with fewer shadows. I'm kind of liking that. For my number 5 palette, I'm going with the Sydney Grace Coffee Talk palette. You guys, if you like your cool toned neutrals, this is the best cool tone neutral palette I think I've ever tried. It is so incredibly beautiful. If you like something kind of like the Natasha Denona Glam, or maybe you like that one but it was a little outside of your budget, this one I would highly recommend. It definitely reminds me of the kind of vibe that that palette gives. Every look I've ever done with this just looks really, really good. Glamorous and good and kind of neutral, but still beautiful and vibrant. It's so pretty. Great color story in the Sydney Grace formula that you guys know I'm so wild about. At number 4, I'm gonna go with my Nabla Cutie Nude palette. Oh man, I still am thinking this should maybe be in my top 3, but it's been a while since I've used this one. So this one hasn't gotten a lot of use out the last like 4 months for me. But prior to that, that's really just because I've tried out so many great palettes over the last like 6 months. But this one, you guys, still will always have a special place in my heart. I think this is such a great palette. The color story looks kind of basic, but it's so unique. There's something about the eye looks that come out of this. While they're neutral, they're also glamorous. They're not really pink, but they're also not brown. They're just this really unique colors and formulas that create the prettiest eye looks that I love so much. Anytime I'm wanting to do something more neutral looking, but also be a little bit more glamorous, maybe it's a special occasion, this is one of the first palettes that I will reach for. I love that it includes a black that you can kind of build up to smoke things out, which I don't love to do very often with black eyeshadows. But again, this is one of those formulas that's kind of a creamier, more cream to powder formula that just does something special for your eyes. I love this palette so much. I use it all the time. You can see some pretty massive dents in some of these shades because this has gotten used by me maybe more than any other palette in my collection over the last year. And that brings us to my top 3. This was tricky. You guys probably know what they are if you've been watching me all year long. Pause and take a guess which one ended up at number 1 down below. All right, coming in at number 3, I had to go with my Natasha Denona My Dream palette. This is such a great palette. Very, very happy with this one. Now it does lean quite pink and kind of rosy. So if you're not into rosy pinks and peaches, there's a lot of pink and a lot of like peachy rosiness in this palette. But there's also a lot of really unique shades in here that I think are really fun. This shade right here has like this soft duochrome effect to it. This one is such a unique duochrome. It's kind of a magenta sort of golden green. Do you guys see when I turn it to the side? You can see that green. It's such an interesting shade. It's really, really beautiful. I love these cream to powder mattes in here. I love that you get a black and then also like a berry kind of brownie plum shade. I love those kind of shades in my outer corner. So many beautiful looks can come out of this palette, whether you're doing something soft and light and neutral or deep and rich and smoky. I mean, you can go any level with this palette. I absolutely love it. I just think she curates some of the best palettes. Her ratio of like formulas and light to dark is always so perfectly done in my opinion, and this is one of her best. There's a reason that I think she called this the My Dream palette. I can see why I think these are beautiful shades that would look good on just about anyone, and I love reaching for this. Ranked at number 2, I'm going with the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette. This palette squeaked in at the tail end of the year, and I cannot believe I'm ranking at number 2, but you guys, I am so in love with this palette. It is such a great color story. Now, if you don't like greens or like minty greens, I would pass on this altogether because there is quite a bit in here that's that minty shade of green. You get like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different shades that kind of are in that color range, which I love. I really love that type of a green on my eye. I think it's very flattering. They're almost kind of silvery looking, but I love them so much. They create some of the prettiest eye looks, whether you're doing something monochromatic or you can mix it up with some like pink or some beige in the crease, maybe put a bronze on the lid, maybe smoke it out with this dark brown right there. Any combination from this looks really good. Like, it doesn't matter if you're combining the greens and the pinks or doing monochromatic with the pink or monochromatic with the green or going all neutrals. You can get so many beautiful, interesting, colorful but not too colorful looks out of this palette that just are so much fun. One of the most interesting color stories I've ever seen. I have created so many different looks out of this thing. There's so much variety in here, more than you'd even think just looking at it. But there's not a shade in here that I don't absolutely love and that doesn't just work amazingly well. And that leaves us with my number one palette. Now I was back and forth on my number one and number two because they kind of remind me a little bit of each other. But for my number one palette, I had to go with the ABH Nouveau palette. This ranked number one in my halfway through the year video, and it's holding the number one spot because I still think this palette is just a perfect palette. Again, the range in here is very important. That's such a big deal to me. I always need some light shades and some dark shades. I need some lighter shimmers, and then I need some darker mattes. That's super important to me, and you definitely get that in here. I love some of these lighter shimmers in here. They're beautiful lid shades. This green right here, by the way, this is the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today. I have this silvery green on my lid. Now, what I said about the greens inside here, if you are kind of maybe intimidated by a mintier green, you're gonna like this green a lot better because it's a lot more neutral, a lot more kind of like silvery and metallic and not obviously green. It's a softer green than what you get inside the Retro Glam, but it is gorgeous. It is what I have all over my lid. I have in my crease this kind of like peachy, soft pink right here, which is so pretty. It looks kind of boring, but there's a lot of pigment in these shades. They're really pigmented and I absolutely love them. And then I just have smoked in my outer corner a mix of this matte green and this matte brown. That's kind of what's smoked out in the outer corner, and it's lovely. Every look I've done with this palette is incredibly beautiful. This pink right here is so pretty on the lid. It's kind of like a pinky bronze with like gold and almost looks like there are some green particles in here as well, but they're barely noticeable. Oh, it's so pretty and so interesting. The formulas are great. I've been so impressed with the formulas in both this and the Rose Metals palette. I've always loved ABH's formula, but I feel like especially the shimmers are better than what I remember from her before. It's just very well done. I love the color story. It's fun, but it's more neutral than it is fun. This is the perfect palette for someone that maybe wants to branch out a little bit, like get a little bit more exciting than something like this, but you don't want to go too crazy. This is what I would recommend. Job well done, ABH. You guys blew me away with this thing this year. And that, you guys, is it. Those are all of my palettes from 2022 ranked. What did you guys think? Did any of these take you by surprise? What was your number one palette this last year that you tried? I would love to hear that down in the comments below. I want to send you guys a big thank you. Thank you for watching my videos this year. Any of you that are new here, thank you for joining me today. Make sure that you subscribe before you leave. But that is going to do it for today. Happy New Year, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye.